Your kind always comes in here faking injuries for pain medication. Dr. Richard Pemberton sneered, towering over the 17-year-old black girl clutching her swollen arm. I've seen 1,000 drug-seeking thugs like you. Emergency rooms aren't pharmacies for the ghetto. Naomi Williams bit back tears as her arm throbbed with agony, the bone visibly displaced beneath her dark skin. Please, sir. I fell during track practice. My coach said it's definitely broken. Your coach isn't a doctor. I am. And I'm telling you to stop wasting my time before I call security. Have you ever watched a doctor's prejudice destroy their entire career in one shift? For hours earlier, Naomi Williams had been exactly where she belonged, flying down the track at Westbridge High School, her legs pumping like pistons as she rounded the final turn of the 400-meter relay. The afternoon sun beat down on the red clay track, and sweat glistened on her dark skin as she pushed through the final 50 meters. At 17, Naomi was the fastest runner in Georgia's District 5, with college scouts from 3 Division I programs already making promises about full scholarships. Her bedroom walls were covered with medals, ribbons, and newspaper clippings documenting her rise from a shy freshman to a state championship contender. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had featured her in their high school athlete spotlight just 2 weeks ago, calling her the future of American track and field. Track wasn't just a sport for Naomi. It was her ticket out, her future, her dream crystallized into 400 meters of pure determination. While other kids at Westbridge worried about SAT scores and college essays, Naomi's path was clear. Qualify for nationals, accept one of the scholarship offers, and eventually make it to the Olympic trials. She'd been running since she was 8 years old, ever since her mother took her to watch the Summer Olympics, and she saw Allison Felix win gold. Come on, Naomi. Push it. Coach Anderson shouted from the sidelines as she accelerated into her final sprint. State championship form. Let's see it. Naomi's teammates lined the track, cheering as she demonstrated the speed that had made her legendary in Atlanta's high school sports community. Her best friend Maya was recording on her phone, capturing footage for the recruitment video they were putting together. Everything was perfect. Her form was flawless. Her time was on pace to beat her personal record, and the spring meet was just 3 weeks away. But champions aren't made on perfect days. They're forged in moments when everything goes wrong. Naomi's left foot caught on a raised edge of the track surface, a maintenance issue the school had been ignoring for months due to budget cuts. The maintenance request had been filed back in January, but Westbridge High, located in one of Atlanta's predominantly black neighborhoods, always seemed to be at the bottom of the district's priority list when it came to facility repairs. Her body pitched forward at full speed. An instinct made her throw out her right arm to break the fall. The crack echoed across the practice field like a gunshot. Pain exploded through her forearm, white-hot and absolute. Naomi rolled onto her back, cradling her arm against her chest as tears streamed down her face. Through the haze of agony, she could see her arm bent at an unnatural angle just below the elbow, swelling already beginning to distort the clean lines of her athletic build. The bone had displaced so severely that even through her dark skin, she could see the abnormal contour. Don't move. Somebody call 911. Coach Anderson sprinted across the field, his face pale with concern as he knelt beside his star athlete. He'd been coaching for 23 years and had seen enough injuries to know this was serious, possibly career-threatening if not treated immediately. Within minutes, the track was swarmed with teammates, some crying, others standing in shocked silence. Maya was still holding her phone, but now she was crying too hard to keep it steady. The school trainer, Mrs. Peterson, arrived with the first aid kit, but one look at Naomi's arm told her this was beyond anything she could handle on site. The paramedics arrived quickly, their ambulance pulling right onto the practice field. The lead EMT, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes named Sandra, knelt beside Naomi and immediately began her assessment. Okay, sweetheart, I'm Sandra. Can you tell me your name? Naomi Williams, she gasped through tears. It hurts so bad. I can't move my fingers. Sandra's expression became more serious at those words. Inability to move fingers suggested possible nerve damage, which meant this needed immediate attention from an orthopedic specialist. You're going to be okay, Naomi. I can see you have a displaced fracture, probably both radius and ulna bones in your forearm. We're going to immobilize this and get you to the hospital right away. Sandra worked with smooth efficiency, carefully splinting the arm, while her partner started in 4-line and administered initial pain medication. My mom. Naomi gasped through the pain. Someone needs to call my mom. She's going to be so worried. Already done, Coach Anderson assured her, climbing into the ambulance beside her. I reached her assistant. Your mom's in meetings all day at the hospital, but they're tracking her down now. They said she's at Mercy General. Naomi nodded, fresh tears mixing with the dried ones on her cheeks. Her mother, Dr. Catherine Williams, was starting her first day as chief of surgery at Mercy General Hospital, a historic appointment that made her the first Black woman to hold the position in the hospital's 127-year history. The irony wasn't lost on Naomi even through her pain. Her mother was somewhere in the building she was being rushed to, probably in meetings about improving patient care and institutional excellence, discussing strategic plans and quality metrics. We're taking you to Mercy General. It's the closest Level 1 trauma center, Sandra explained as the ambulance pulled away from Westbridge High, sirens wailing. They have excellent orthopedic surgeons, and we'll make sure you're taken care of, honey. Through the ambulance window, Naomi could see her teammates gathered on the track, Maya still clutching her phone, Coach Anderson's jacket left behind on the ground where he'd dropped it to help her. The banners proclaiming state championship bound fluttered in the breeze, and Naomi felt a new wave of tears, not from physical pain, but from the terrifying possibility that her athletic career might be over before it had really begun. Neither of them. Not Naomi clutching her broken arm in the ambulance, not Coach Anderson trying to stay calm beside her, not Sandra the paramedic radioing ahead to the emergency department, could have imagined how this day would test everything Dr. Catherine Williams had worked her entire career to achieve. They couldn't have known that Naomi's injury would expose a rot at the heart of American healthcare, or that the next few hours would spark a national conversation about medical racism that would change hospitals across the country. Dr. Richard Pemberton had been working in Mercy General's emergency department for 11 years, and in his mind, he'd seen it all. Every shift brought a parade of what he privately called frequent flyers, people he believed were gaming the system, seeking drugs, wasting resources that should be reserved for legitimate patients. At 43 years old, Pemberton had graduated from a mid-tier medical school in the Caribbean after failing to gain admission to U.S. programs. He'd spent his entire career in emergency medicine, never quite achieving the prestige or specialty position he felt he deserved. His applications for trauma fellowships had been rejected. His research proposals had gone unfunded. His attempts to move into hospital administration had been politely declined. Over the years, this professional frustration had curdled into resentment, and that resentment had found a convenient target: young Black patients, especially those from the city's predominantly minority neighborhoods. In Pemberton's worldview, these patients were the reason healthcare was broken. They were the ones clogging emergency rooms with non-emergent complaints, demanding expensive tests for minor problems, seeking narcotic pain medications for exaggerated symptoms. He developed a reputation among the nursing staff for his differential treatment of patients. The nurses had a code for when Pemberton was assigned to certain patients. They'd quietly warn each other, "Pemberton's got room 7," with a particular tone that conveyed both frustration and helplessness. Another one coming in, Nurse Jessica Martinez said, reviewing the incoming ambulance report at the nurses' station. She was a 32-year-old Latina nurse who'd been working at Mercy General for 6 years and had filed 3 formal complaints about Pemberton's behavior, all of which had gone nowhere. 17-year-old female, suspected radius and ulna fracture, injured during track practice at Westbridge High. Pemberton looked up from his coffee, his expression already hardening. Westbridge, that's the inner-city school, right? The one in the news for the gang problems. Jessica's jaw tightened. That's not what they're known for. Westbridge has one of the top-ranked track programs in the state. This girl's apparently being recruited by Division I schools. She's a serious athlete with a serious injury. Sure she is, Pemberton muttered, loud enough for Jessica to hear. Let me guess, she'll come in claiming she needs the strongest pain medication we have, probably has a history of drug-seeking behavior. These athletes are all the same, especially the ones from those schools. They get injured and suddenly they're addicts. Dr. Pemberton, you haven't even seen the patient yet, Jessica said sharply, her pen pressing hard enough into her clipboard to leave an indentation. Maybe wait until you examine her before making assumptions about a child you know nothing about. But Pemberton was already walking away, his mind made up before Naomi's ambulance even pulled into the bay. He stopped by the staff break room to refill his coffee, complaining to anyone who would listen. Inner-city kid coming in claiming a track injury, he said to Dr. Harrison Chun, one of the other ER attendings. Bet you $20 she's here for a Percocet prescription. Dr. Chun looked uncomfortable. Richard, that's not really appropriate. Oh, come on. You know as well as I do that half these kids are just running scams. Their schools send them here because they know we have to treat them, and then we get stuck with unpaid bills when their Medicaid doesn't cover it. The truth was, Pemberton's behavior had been escalating for years, and it wasn't just about adolescent patients. Other ER staff had noticed how he treated patients differently based on race. Longer wait times for Black patients, more skepticism about their pain levels, quicker dismissals of their symptoms. He'd order comprehensive workups for white patients with vague complaints while sending Black patients with specific, serious symptoms home with instructions to take Tylenol and rest. Several nurses had tried reporting his conduct to the previous chief of surgery, Dr. Harold Westbrook, but Westbrook had been part of the hospital's old guard, more interested in protecting doctors than protecting patients. Westbrook believed that the biggest problem in healthcare was frivolous lawsuits and government overregulation, not physician bias. Boys will be boys, Westbrook had said dismissively when Jessica filed a formal complaint 6 months earlier. Dr. Pemberton is just thorough. He doesn't want to contribute to the opioid epidemic by handing out pain medication like candy. We need more physicians who are willing to stand firm against drug-seeking behavior, not fewer. But this wasn't about the opioid epidemic, and Jessica knew it. She'd watched Pemberton prescribe generous amounts of narcotic pain medication to white patients with minor injuries, while refusing even Tylenol to Black patients with obvious fractures. She'd seen him order MRIs and CT scans for white patients with headaches while dismissing Black patients with the same complaints as just stressed or probably hungover. The pattern was clear, documented, and dangerous. But in a hospital system that prioritized physician autonomy and feared conflict, nothing had been done. Jessica returned to the nurse's station and quietly pulled up Pemberton's assignment history from the past 6 months. She'd been collecting data, building a case, hoping that eventually someone with authority would listen. The statistics were damning. Black patients waited an average of 47 minutes longer to be seen by Pemberton than white patients with identical triage levels. Black patients were 73% less likely to receive adequate pain medication. Black patients were 3 times more likely to be discharged without follow-up appointments. Black patients had filed 12 formal complaints about Pemberton's treatment in the past year alone. But data didn't matter if no one in power cared to look at it. As the ambulance pulled into the emergency bay, Pemberton positioned himself at the intake desk, his arms crossed, his expression set in the condescending sneer that his staff had come to recognize as his drug-seeker face. Naomi Williams was about to become his patient. And somewhere in the administrative wing of Mercy General, for floors above the emergency department, Dr. Catherine Williams was finishing her first meeting as chief of surgery, completely unaware that her daughter's life was about to intersect with everything she'd been fighting against her entire career. Dr. Catherine Williams stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the chief of surgery's office, looking out over the sprawling medical complex that was now her responsibility. At 45 years old, she'd spent 23 years climbing through the ranks of academic medicine, medical school at Johns Hopkins where she was one of only 12 Black students in her class, surgical residency at Massachusetts General where she endured constant microaggressions and low-key racism, fellowships in trauma and critical care where she had to be twice as good to receive half the recognition, all while raising Naomi as a single mother after her husband Michael died in a car accident when Naomi was 3. Every achievement had required twice the work because of her race and gender. Every promotion had been questioned. Every decision had been scrutinized through a lens of skepticism that her white male colleagues never faced. She'd published 47 peer-reviewed papers, performed over 3,000 successful surgeries, trained 62 residents, and served on committees for the American College of Surgeons, the Society of Black Academic Surgeons, and the Association of Women Surgeons. But she'd made it. Against all odds, against a system designed to filter out people who looked like her, she was now the chief of surgery at a major metropolitan hospital, responsible for overseeing 47 surgeons, 200 residents and fellows, and surgical services that treated over 30,000 patients annually with a combined budget of $180 million. The office itself was impressive: mahogany furniture, medical textbooks lining built-in shelves, diplomas and awards covering one wall, and a vintage photograph of the hospital's founding physicians from 1896, all white men in formal suits. Catherine had already decided that photograph was coming down, to be replaced with images that reflected the diversity of modern medicine. Dr. Williams, we have 3 more department heads waiting to meet with you. Her new assistant, Patricia Chun, announced from the doorway. Patricia was a cheerful 30-year-old who'd worked at Mercy General for 5 years and seemed genuinely excited to be working for the hospital's first black female chief of surgery, orthopedics, neurosurgery, and cardiothoracic. And the CEO's office called. Mr. Morrison wants to schedule a meeting about the budget proposals for next fiscal year. Catherine nodded, smoothing down her white coat with its freshly embroidered title. Catherine Williams, MD, FACS, Chief of Surgery. She'd barely sat down in this office, barely had time to adjust the framed photo of Naomi on her desk, and already the demands were overwhelming. Her phone buzzed with a text from Coach Anderson. Naomi injured at practice. Taking her to your ER. Broken arm, looks bad. She's okay, but in serious pain. Paramedics are with us now. Catherine's heart dropped like a stone, but years of surgical training kept her composed. Her hands didn't shake as she quickly typed back. On my way. Which bay? Have them page me the moment she arrives. She grabbed her phone and headed for the door, but before she could reach the elevator, her phone rang. The hospital CEO, James Morrison, his name flashing on the screen with the urgent ringtone she'd assigned to high-priority calls. Dr. Williams, we have a situation, Morrison said without preamble. The surgical complication from last week. The patient's family has retained a lawyer, and they're demanding an immediate meeting. The board is convening an emergency session, and they need you there now. I know it's your first day, but this is critical. My daughter's been injured, Catherine said, pressing the elevator call button repeatedly. She's being brought to our emergency department with a fracture. I understand, and I'm sorry, Morrison interrupted. But Dr. Williams, this lawsuit could cost us millions. The board specifically hired you to handle these kinds of crises. The patient's family is threatening to go to the media if we don't meet with them today. Right now, Catherine stood frozen in the hallway, her finger hovering over the elevator button. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, feel the familiar tension of being pulled between motherhood and career, a tension that male surgeons rarely experienced because they had wives who handled these emergencies. Patricia, Catherine called back to her office. Get someone to the ER to check on my daughter. Tell them her mother is the chief of surgery and to update me immediately on her status. And tell Dr. Morrison I'll call him in 5 minutes. She dialed Naomi's number, but it went straight to voicemail, probably because her daughter's phone was with her belongings while she was being treated. She tried Coach Anderson's number next. Dr. Williams, we just arrived at Mercy General, Coach Anderson said, and Catherine could hear the ambulance siren in the background. Naomi's arm is definitely broken, both bones displaced. The paramedics gave her some pain medication, but she's still hurting pretty bad. They're taking her straight into the ER. Tell them I'm the chief of surgery, Catherine said firmly. Tell them to give her the best orthopedic surgeon on duty and that I want updates every 15 minutes. I'm dealing with an emergency meeting, but I'll be down there as soon as I possibly can. Will do, Dr. Williams. I'll stay with her until you get here. As Catherine ended the call, she felt the familiar guilt that had haunted her entire career. The guilt of being a black woman in medicine, of working twice as hard to be considered half as good, of sacrificing time with her daughter to break down barriers that shouldn't have existed in the first place. She pulled up her text chain with Naomi and sent, "Baby, I'm so sorry. There's an emergency meeting I can't get out of. Coach Anderson is with you, and I'm sending someone to check on you. I love you so much, and I'll be there as soon as I can. You're going to be fine. Red heart." Then she straightened her white coat, lifted her chin, and walked toward the conference room where the board was waiting, forcing herself to project the confidence and competence that everyone expected from the chief of surgery. She had no way of knowing that every minute of delay would matter, that her daughter was already being failed by the very system Catherine had been hired to reform, that the next hour would force her to choose between the political capital she needed to implement systemic change and the immediate defense of her own child. Naomi was wheeled into examination room 7, her arm cradled against her chest in the temporary splint the paramedics had applied, her face streaked with tears and sweat from the pain that radiated from her wrist to her shoulder with every heartbeat. The pain medication they'd given her in the ambulance had barely taken the edge off. Coach Anderson walked beside the gurney, his hand on her good shoulder, offering what comfort he could. "Your mom's on her way," he assured her, though he'd heard the tension in Dr. Williams' voice and wondered how long, "as soon as I can," would actually be. "She works here, remember? You're in good hands." Nurse Jessica Martinez took Naomi's vitals with practiced gentleness, noting the obvious deformity in her right forearm. The displacement was significant. She could see the abnormal angle even through the splint. "Honey, I'm going to get you something for the pain right away, and we'll get x-rays ordered. Can you rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? 9. Naomi gasped, new tears spilling down her cheeks. Maybe 10. It hurts so bad I feel sick to my stomach. Jessica's face softened with sympathy. I believe you, sweetheart. Let me get the doctor in here so we can get you properly treated. But when Jessica stepped out to request pain medication orders and get x-rays scheduled, Dr. Pemberton was waiting at the nurse's station, his expression already set with suspicion. He was reviewing the chart on the computer screen, his lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Hold on, he said, blocking Jessica's access to the medication dispensary with his body. I haven't examined the patient yet. You know the protocol. No medications until physician assessment and approval. Dr. Pemberton, she has a visible deformity and is clearly in severe pain. Jessica argued, keeping her voice professional despite her frustration. This is a straightforward orthopedic injury from a witnessed accident. The paramedics documented bilateral bone displacement. So she claims, Pemberton said, his eyes still on the computer screen. 17 years old, inner city school, no previous medical records in our system, no insurance information verified yet. How do we know this isn't a setup? How do we know she didn't injure herself days ago and is just now coming and looking for narcotics? Jessica stared at him in disbelief. A setup for what? She broke her arm during track practice with witnesses. Paramedics documented the injury at the scene. Track practice. Pemberton's tone dripped with sarcasm as he finally looked up from the computer. Right. And I suppose she's an Olympic hopeful too? They always have some story about being athletes or honor students. It's always the same sob story designed to manipulate us into prescribing drugs. She is being recruited by Division I schools, Jessica said, her voice rising slightly. This is a legitimate injury to a legitimate athlete. I'll be the judge of what's legitimate, Pemberton snapped. I'm the physician. That's my job, not yours. Now step aside so I can do my assessment without nurses second-guessing my clinical judgment. He pushed past Jessica and entered examination room 7, where Naomi sat on the gurney, trembling with pain and fear. Her track uniform was still visible under the thin hospital gown someone had draped over her shoulders. Coach Anderson stood protectively beside her, his Westbridge High School jacket still bearing grass stains from where he'd knelt beside her on the field. So, Pemberton said without preamble, not bothering to introduce himself, not making eye contact with his patient, his arms crossed as he stood at the foot of the gurney. What's the real story here? Naomi looked up, confused and frightened by the hostile tone. I fell during practice. My arm, it's broken. I heard it crack. I can't move my fingers and it hurts so much. Your arm looks fine to me. Pemberton interrupted, barely glancing at the obviously swollen and deformed limb still cradled in the splint. A little bruising, maybe some swelling from impact. Nothing that requires emergency intervention or narcotic pain medication. Coach Anderson stepped forward, his voice firm. Excuse me, doctor, but I was there when she fell. I'm her coach. I heard the bone break. It made a sound like a gunshot. Her arm is clearly fractured. You can see the displacement. Are you a physician? Pemberton snapped, finally making eye contact, but only with the coach, still not acknowledging Naomi directly. No, but I've been coaching for 23 years, and I've seen plenty of broken bones. Then I'll thank you to let me do my job, Pemberton said coldly. I don't need coaching advice in my examination room. If I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. He turned back to Naomi, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. How long have you been using? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Using? Naomi repeated, not understanding at first. Using what? Don't play stupid with me. Drugs. Pills. What are you on? Oxy. Percocet? Vicodin. What did you really come here for today? His tone was accusatory, aggressive, treating the injured teenager like a criminal in an interrogation room rather than a patient in need of care. The realization hit Naomi like a physical blow, momentarily overwhelming even the pain in her arm. He thought she was faking. He thought she was a drug addict. He was accusing her of lying about her injury to get prescription medications. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but now they were tears of humiliation as much as pain. I don't do drugs, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm an athlete. I don't even drink alcohol. I'm in training. I have college scouts watching me. I would never. Right? An athlete. Pemberton's laugh was cruel and dismissive. Let me guess. You're also an honors student. You volunteer at church. You've never been in trouble. You're a model citizen. That's what they all say. That's the script you people always use when you come in here trying to scam the system. You people? Coach Anderson repeated, his voice dangerous. What exactly do you mean by you people, doctor? I mean drug seekers, Pemberton said, but his tone made it clear he meant something else entirely. I mean people who use emergency rooms as pharmacies. I mean teenagers who fake injuries to get high. Coach Anderson pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with anger. I'm calling her mother right now. This is completely inappropriate. You're making racist assumptions about a child with an obvious injury. Go ahead, Pemberton said dismissively. Call whoever you want. Call the president if it makes you feel better. But I'm the physician on duty, and I'm telling you that this patient does not have a medical emergency requiring narcotic medications. I've seen 1,000 drug-seeking teenagers come through here with fake injuries and sob stories. My arm is broken, Naomi cried out, the pain and injustice overwhelming her attempt at composure. She tried to unwrap the splint with her good hand to show him the deformity, but even that small movement sent lightning bolts of agony through her arm. Please, just look at it. Just take an x-ray. I'm not lying. Why would I lie about this? X-rays are expensive, Pemberton said coldly, as if discussing the price of groceries rather than a child's medical care. And I'm not going to waste hospital resources on someone who's clearly here to scam the system. Do you have any idea how much an x-ray costs? How much an orthopedic consult costs? Someone has to pay for these things, and it's not going to be you, is it? It'll be the hospital, which means it comes out of taxpayer money. We have insurance, Naomi gasped. My mom has insurance through her job. Sure you do, Pemberton sneered. Your mom who you claim is a surgeon, right? Let me guess. She's also a lawyer and a CEO and a Nobel Prize winner? You people always exaggerate to make yourselves seem important, to make yourselves seem like you deserve special treatment. Listen here, ghetto trash, Pemberton hissed, leaning over Naomi's gurney so that his face was inches from hers, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You think that track uniform fools anyone? You think making up stories about college scouts is going to get you drugs? This place has standards. Real standards, not street standards. Naomi shrank back against the raised gurney, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. This was a doctor, someone who'd taken an oath to help people, and he was treating her like garbage. Sir, please step back, Coach Anderson said firmly, moving between Pemberton and Naomi. You're frightening her, and this is completely unprofessional. Unprofessional. Pemberton's face flushed red with anger. You want to see unprofessional? Unprofessional is coming into an emergency room with a fake injury, wasting resources that could go to real patients with real emergencies. Unprofessional is playing the race card when a doctor uses his clinical judgment. No one said anything about race until you did. Coach Anderson shot back. But since you brought it up, yes, this absolutely seems like racial discrimination. You haven't even properly examined her arm. You've spent more time accusing her of being a drug addict than you have looking at her injury. Nurse Jessica burst back into the room, having heard the raised voices from the hallway. Dr. Pemberton, I've called for an orthopedic consult. Dr. Reynolds is on his way. Cancel it. Pemberton snapped without taking his eyes off Coach Anderson. There's no injury here that requires specialty consultation. This is a waste of Dr. Reynolds' time and hospital resources. Doctor, I can see the bone displacement from here, Jessica argued, her professional composure cracking under the weight of what she was witnessing. This patient clearly needs immediate orthopedic treatment. Her neurovascular status could be compromised. Are you questioning my medical judgment, Nurse Martinez? Pemberton turned his anger on Jessica now. Because last time I checked, nurses don't make diagnostic decisions. You take orders from physicians. That's how the hierarchy works. Or do I need to have a conversation with your supervisor about insubordination? Jessica's face went pale, but she stood her ground. Dr. Pemberton, I'm documenting everything that's happening here. This patient came in with an obvious fracture, has been in severe pain for over 90 minutes, and you haven't ordered any pain medication or diagnostic imaging. That's below the standard of care. What's below the standard of care is enabling drug-seeking behavior, Pemberton interrupted. What's below the standard of care is handing out narcotics to every teenager who comes in here with a convenient story. We have an opioid epidemic in this country, or haven't you noticed? Doctors like me are the only ones with the spine to stand up against it. This isn't about the opioid epidemic, Jessica said, her voice shaking now with barely controlled fury. This is about a 17-year-old girl with a broken arm who's being denied care because of your prejudice. That's enough, Pemberton roared. Get out of my examination room. Now, you're fired. You can't fire me. Jessica said quietly. You're not my supervisor. Then consider yourself reported for insubordination, harassment, and interfering with patient care. Pemberton turned back to Naomi, who was now sobbing openly, her good hand pressed against her mouth to stifle the sounds. And you need to leave. Take your fake injury and your little scam and go to a different hospital. Maybe one of the clinics in your neighborhood will fall for this nonsense, but I won't. You want pain medication? Pemberton continued, his voice rising to a shout now. Go to a drug dealer on the street corner. You want to scam someone? Try a different hospital. But I'm not playing your game. I'm not contributing to the destruction of young black lives by feeding addiction. I'm actually helping you by saying no, even though you're too ignorant to realize it. Coach Anderson's phone was out now, recording everything. This is discrimination. This is medical malpractice. This is assault. You're filming me? Pemberton's face went from red to purple. That's a violation of hospital policy. That's illegal. I could have you arrested. And I could have this on the news in an hour. Coach Anderson shot back, his voice deadly calm despite his rage. This young woman has a serious injury requiring immediate treatment, and you're denying her care based purely on racist assumptions about who she is and where she's from. How dare you call me racist? Pemberton snarled. I treat everyone the same. I hold everyone to the same standards. It's not my fault that certain populations have higher rates of drug-seeking behavior. Stop talking. Jessica interjected desperately. Dr. Pemberton, please stop talking. Everything you're saying is being recorded. But Pemberton was beyond reason now, his professional mask completely stripped away to reveal the prejudice beneath. You know what the problem is? The problem is that we've created a culture where these people think they can come into places like this and demand service like they own the place. Well, I have news for you. This isn't Section 8 housing. This isn't a welfare office. This is a hospital, and I decide who gets treated and who gets shown the door. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Naomi was no longer just crying. She was hyperventilating, her body shaking with pain, fear, humiliation, and the traumatic realization that the color of her skin mattered more to this doctor than her injury, her pain, or her humanity. Please, she begged one final time, her voice barely a whisper. Please help me. My arm hurts so bad. I'm scared. Please. Pemberton looked at her with utter contempt. What you need is to stop wasting my time before I call security to drag you out of here. He turned and headed for the door, then stopped and delivered his final blow. I'm documenting this as a non-emergent complaint with no objective findings requiring treatment. Patient exhibited drug-seeking behavior. Patient refused to leave when asked. Patient can follow up with her primary care physician if she wants to pursue it further. Examination complete. He walked out, letting the door slam behind him, leaving Naomi sobbing on the gurney, her arm visibly broken, her pain untreated, her dignity shattered into as many pieces as the bones in her forearm. Jessica immediately moved to Naomi's side, tears streaming down her own face now. Sweetheart, I am so sorry. That was completely unacceptable and wrong. I'm going to get you help, I promise you. I'm going to fix this. But the damage was done. In the span of 20 minutes, Naomi had learned a brutal lesson about how the world saw her. Not as a championship athlete with a 4.2 GPA, not as a student council vice president, not as someone's beloved daughter with dreams of Olympic glory, but as you people. As ghetto trash. As a suspect. As someone whose suffering didn't matter because of the melanin in her skin. Coach Anderson was already on his phone, his voice tight, with barely controlled rage. Yes, this is Marcus Anderson. I'm the track coach at Westbridge High. I'm at Mercy General Hospital with one of my students, and we've just experienced the most blatant case of medical racism I've ever witnessed. I need to speak to someone in administration immediately. No, I will not hold. This is an emergency. And somewhere 4 floors above them, Dr. Catherine Williams was sitting in a conference room filled with lawyers and board members, discussing surgical complications and liability mitigation strategies, completely unaware that her worst fears about systemic racism in medicine weren't abstract problems to be solved in policy meetings. They were happening to her daughter. Right now, in her own hospital. Coach Anderson's hands shook with rage and adrenaline as he reviewed the video he'd recorded. 4 minutes and 23 seconds of undeniable medical discrimination captured in crystal clear 1080p HD. Dr. Pemberton's sneering face filled the frame, his words captured with devastating clarity. Listen here, ghetto trash. Your kind always comes in here faking injuries, drug-seeking thugs. Emergency rooms aren't pharmacies for the ghetto. These people. Section 8 Housing, Welfare Office. Naomi, Coach Anderson said gently, crouching beside the gurney where she still sat untreated, her arm now swollen to nearly twice its normal size, the skin stretched tight and shiny, taking on a disturbing purple-red color that Jessica recognized as a sign of compartment syndrome, a medical emergency that could result in permanent tissue damage. I need your permission to share this video. The world needs to see what just happened here. Through her tears and pain, Naomi looked at her coach with red-rimmed eyes. How many, she whispered. How many what, sweetheart? How many other kids has he done this to? How many other black kids came in here hurt and scared and got treated like criminals? Her voice was hoarse from crying. If this happened to me, and my mom is literally the chief of surgery here, how many kids with no power, no protection, no voice? How many of them did he hurt? Coach Anderson felt his throat tighten with emotion. Too many, baby girl. Way too many. Then post it, Naomi said with sudden fierce clarity despite her pain. Post it everywhere. If me being humiliated can stop this from happening to even one other kid, then post it. Coach Anderson nodded and opened Twitter, his primary social media platform, where he had about 3,500 followers, mostly parents, other coaches, local sports journalists, and alumni from his 23 years of coaching. His thumb hovered over the post button for just a moment as he composed the caption. This is what racism in healthcare looks like. Dr. Richard Pemberton at Mercy General Hospital just refused to treat my 17-year-old state champion athlete's obviously broken arm because she's black. Called her ghetto trash and drug-seeking thug. Accused her of faking to get pills. This is why black patients die at higher rates. This is why we don't trust the medical system. This is why we're afraid to go to the doctor. Watch the whole video. Hashtag Mercy General, hashtag healthcare racism, hashtag justice for Naomi, hashtag Black Health Matters. He pressed post at 3:47 p.m. By 3:52 p.m., it had 200 shares and 400 likes. By 4 p.m., it had 2,000 shares and was trending locally in Atlanta with the hashtag Mercy General. By 4:15 p.m., it had broken 10,000 shares and was being picked up by local news stations. Channel 2, Channel 5, and Channel 11 were all sending crews to the hospital. By 4:30 p.m., it had 50,000 shares and national attention. CNN's breaking news alert read, video shows doctor allegedly refusing care to black teen with broken arm. Nurse Jessica Martinez watched the hospital's social media accounts exploding in real time from the nurse's station, her phone buzzing continuously with notifications. She'd shared Coach Anderson's video to her own Twitter account, which had about 1,200 followers, mostly other nurses and healthcare workers, with additional context that added fuel to the already raging fire. I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General. I've been reporting Dr. Pemberton's racist treatment patterns for months. I filed 3 formal complaints. Management did nothing. Now a child is suffering with an untreated fracture. This is what happens when hospitals protect bad doctors instead of patients. How many others has he harmed? How many complaints were ignored? Hashtag healthcare workers speak out, hashtag Mercy General, hashtag protect patients. The comments flooded in by the hundreds, then thousands, each one adding fuel to the fire. My son was treated by this exact doctor last year at Mercy General, and he did the same thing. Accused him of drug seeking, sent him home. Turned out he had appendicitis. We had to drive to another hospital at 2 a.m. This is exactly why black maternal mortality rates are 3 times higher than white women. Doctors don't believe us when we say we're in pain. They think we're exaggerating. They let us die. I worked at Mercy General for 2 years, and I reported this doctor 3 times for discriminatory behavior. They protected him instead of patients. I finally quit because I couldn't stomach being complicit in racism. Someone find out who runs this hospital and flood their office with calls. Find the board of directors. Find the CEO. This is unacceptable. My sister died because a doctor didn't believe her pain was real. Said she was drug seeking. She had an ectopic pregnancy that ruptured. She bled out. She was 26 years old. This video is triggering, but everyone needs to see it. Within an hour, other videos began emerging. Former patients started posting their own recordings and testimonies. A middle-aged black woman shared doorbell camera footage of herself limping back to her car after being discharged from Mercy General's ER, only to be readmitted 2 hours later by a different hospital with a diagnosis of DVT, deep vein thrombosis, that could have killed her. Dr. Pemberton told me I was just sore from sitting too long. Said I needed to lose weight and exercise more. A black father posted his daughter's medical records showing she'd been sent home from Mercy General with anxiety, only to be diagnosed with a brain tumor at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta 3 days later. We almost lost our baby because Dr. Pemberton decided her headaches weren't real. In the examination room, Naomi's phone was buzzing constantly despite her inability to use her injured arm. Maya, her best friend from the track team, was texting frantically. "Naomi, the video is everywhere. Everyone from school is sharing it. The track team is organizing a protest outside the hospital. Coach Williams from the Olympic Training Center just tweeted about you. She said this happened to her too when she was young. You're trending on Twitter. Hashtag Justice for Naomi is #1 in Atlanta. Someone started a GoFundMe for your medical bills, and it's already at $75,000. CNN just called the school asking for an interview. Baby girl, you're going viral," Coach Anderson said softly, showing Naomi his phone. "Your story is reaching millions of people." Naomi looked at the screen through her tears, watching the share count climb. 75,000, 80,000, 90,000. And most importantly, someone in the viral thread had made a connection that would change everything. A Twitter user named @MedicalJusticeNow posted, "Wait, I just looked at Mercy General's website. Their new chief of surgery who just started today is named Dr. Catherine Williams. Is this her daughter? Did this racist doctor refuse to treat the chief of surgery's daughter?" The tweet was retweeted 15,000 times in 10 minutes. The pieces were falling into place across social media faster than anyone at the hospital could control or contain. The story wasn't just about a racist doctor anymore. It wasn't just about one injured teenager. It was about a mother who'd been hired to reform a broken system, only to have that system brutalize her own child on her very first day in charge. It was about the pervasiveness of medical racism, so deeply embedded that even the chief of surgery's daughter wasn't protected from it. It was about every black parent's worst fear, that no amount of education, no amount of success, no amount of respectability politics would protect their children from being seen as thugs and ghetto trash by people with power over their lives and health. The reckoning was coming. The national conversation was igniting. The pressure was building, and it was building fast. Dr. Catherine Williams burst through the emergency department doors at 4:23 p.m. like a force of nature, her white coat billowing behind her, her heels clicking against the linoleum with the precision of a metronome counting down to detonation. She'd abandoned the board meeting mid-sentence when Coach Anderson's increasingly frantic calls finally reached her. When Patricia had burst into the conference room white-faced and whispered, "Dr. Williams, there's a viral video about your daughter, and it's bad. Really bad." "Naomi Williams," Catherine said sharply to the triage nurse, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades earning respect in rooms that didn't want her there. "Where is she?" The triage nurse, a young white woman named Ashley who'd been at Mercy General for only 3 months, looked up from her computer with wide eyes. "Dr. Williams? You're the new chief of... Where is my daughter?" Each word was enunciated with surgical precision, leaving no room for anything but immediate compliance. "Examination room 7, ma'am. But I should warn you." Catherine didn't wait for the warning. She navigated the emergency department with the confidence of someone who'd spent 20 years in hospitals, pushing through double doors and past startled staff members who'd already seen the viral video and were only now connecting the dots between the famous Dr. Williams and the girl in room 7. What she saw when she entered examination room 7 made her blood run cold. Naomi sat on the gurney, her face swollen from crying, her right arm grotesquely deformed and swollen to nearly twice its normal size, the skin stretched tight and taking on a dangerous purple-blue color. The injury was at least 2 hours old now, 2 hours without proper splinting, without pain medication, without treatment. Coach Anderson sat beside her, still filming, documenting everything. Nurse Jessica was holding ice packs to Naomi's forehead and good arm, trying to prevent her from going into shock. "Baby," Catherine breathed, rushing to her daughter's side. Her trained surgical eye immediately assessed the injury with the detachment of professional expertise, even as her heart shattered with maternal anguish. Displaced fracture of both radius and ulna, significant soft tissue swelling, probable neurovascular compromise given the duration without treatment, possible compartment syndrome developing. This was a medical emergency that had been ignored for over 2 hours. "Mom," Naomi sobbed, and the single word contained oceans of pain, fear, humiliation, and betrayal. "Mom, he wouldn't help me. He called me ghetto trash. He said I was a drug addict. He said people like me don't belong here. Catherine felt something break inside her chest, something that couldn't be fixed with surgery or sutured closed with practiced hands. "Oh my God, baby. Who examined you? Who's your attending physician?" "Dr. Pemberton," Jessica said quietly, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "And Dr. Williams, there's something you need to know." But Catherine was already at the computer terminal, pulling up Naomi's electronic medical record with her new administrative credentials. What she found made her surgical precision give way to maternal fury so intense she had to grip the edge of the desk to keep her hands from shaking. The examination note, typed by Dr. Pemberton at 3:35 p.m., read, 17-year-old AA female presenting with complaint of right forearm pain following alleged fall during athletic activity. Patient exhibited drug-seeking behavior and became hostile and aggressive when questioned about substance use history. Patient accompanied by adult male claiming to be coach who also became hostile and threatening toward medical staff. Physical exam. Patient appears well-nourished, no acute distress. Right forearm shows minimal swelling and minor bruising, no obvious deformity noted. Full range of motion observed when patient unaware of being watched, suggesting malingering. Neurovascular status intact. Assessment. Non-emergent musculoskeletal complaint. Suspected malingering for secondary gain, drug-seeking behavior. Recommend outpatient follow-up with PCP if symptoms persist. Plan. No medications prescribed. No imaging ordered. Patient educated on appropriate use of emergency services and dangers of prescription drug abuse. Patient instructed to follow up with primary care physician if needed. Patient became agitated and refused to leave examination room. Required security consultation. Patient's adult companion recorded medical staff without consent in violation of hospital policy. Disposition. Discharge home with instructions. Drug seeking. Catherine's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded hurricanes and earthquakes. Malingering? No obvious deformity. My daughter has a visible fracture, and this doctor documented that there were no objective findings. She turned to look at Naomi's arm again, her professional assessment now filtering through her maternal rage. The displacement was obvious. The swelling was significant. The discoloration suggested vascular compromise. Any first-year medical student could diagnose this injury from across the room. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was willful negligence based on racial prejudice so deeply ingrained that a doctor could look at a child's broken arm and see only a stereotype. Coach Anderson held up his phone. "Dr. Williams, I recorded the entire interaction. It's already gone viral. Over 100,000 shares in the last hour. The whole thing is documented. Every word he said, every accusation he made." Catherine took the phone and watched the video, her face an impassive mask even as her hands trembled with rage. She watched Dr. Pemberton sneer at her daughter, heard him say ghetto trash, and you people, and drug-seeking thugs. Watched him refuse to even properly examine Naomi's obviously broken arm. Watched him accuse a terrified, injured child of criminal intent. When the video ended 4 minutes and 23 seconds later, Catherine's voice was ice-wrapped in steel. "Where is Dr. Pemberton right now?" "Last I saw, he was in the staff lounge," Jessica said, then added quietly, "Dr. Williams, I filed 3 formal complaints about his discriminatory behavior in the past 6 months. They were all dismissed by Dr. Westbrook. I tried to protect patients. I tried to sound the alarm. No one listened." Catherine looked at the nurse, really looked at her, and saw the guilt and helplessness in her eyes. "You did everything right, Jessica. The system failed. I'm going to fix the system. But first, I need to take care of my daughter." She pulled out her phone and made a direct call, using her new credentials to bypass all normal protocols. "Dr. Reynolds, this is Dr. Catherine Williams, Chief of Surgery. I need you in examination room 7 immediately for an emergency orthopedic consult. My daughter has a displaced bilateral forearm fracture that's been neglected for over 2 hours. I need you here in the next 5 minutes, or I'm calling your department chair." "Dr. Williams, I'm in the middle of—" "Benjamin, this is not a request," Catherine interrupted, using Dr. Reynolds's first name to emphasize both her authority and the personal nature of the emergency. "My daughter's neurovascular status is compromised. She may need emergency fasciotomy if we've developed compartment syndrome. 5 minutes. I'll be timing you." She ended the call and personally drew up morphine from the locked medication dispensary, using her new chief of surgery credentials to override every protocol and safeguard. "Jessica, document that I'm ordering 4 milligrams of morphine for push for acute pain management in a pediatric patient with obvious long bone fracture. I'm administering it personally. As Catherine worked with swift, decisive efficiency to finally give her daughter the care she should have received 2 hours ago, the emergency department around her was descending into complete chaos. The hospital's main phone lines were jammed with over 300 calls from angry people who'd seen the video. The switchboard had crashed twice already. The CEO's office was fielding calls from CNN, MSNBC, NBC News, ABC News, CBS News, the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and at least 20 local news stations. The public relations team was in full crisis mode, drafting and redrafting statements that seemed increasingly inadequate in the face of such blatant discrimination captured on video. The hospital's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts were being flooded with thousands of comments demanding Dr. Pemberton's firing, demanding investigations, demanding accountability. Protesters had begun gathering outside the hospital. First a dozen people, then 50, then over 200, many of them holding signs reading Black Health Matters, Fire Racist Doctors, and Justice for Naomi. Local civil rights organizations were issuing statements. The Georgia NAACP had called for a federal investigation. The state medical board's hotline was overwhelmed with complaints about Dr. Pemberton. And Dr. Pemberton himself, completely oblivious in the staff lounge, was laughing with a colleague about the drug-seeking teenager with an attitude problem he'd just handled in room 7. I swear, they get younger and more entitled every year, he was saying to Dr. Harrison Chun, biting into a sandwich from the cafeteria. This one actually tried to claim her mother was a surgeon here. Like I was going to fall for that obvious lie. They always try to name drop or claim connections, thinking it'll get them special treatment. Dr. Chun, who'd been scrolling through Twitter and had just seen the video, had gone pale. Richard, you need to see something. You need to see this right now. What? Pemberton said dismissively, not even looking up from his sandwich. Chun held up his phone, showing the viral video that now had over 150,000 shares and was being featured on CNN's homepage. That patient you just saw? That drug-seeking teenager? Pemberton finally looked at the screen, watching his own face sneering at Naomi, hearing his own words condemning him. His sandwich fell from his hand onto the table. Do you have any idea whose daughter that is? Chun continued, his voice a mixture of horror and disbelief. Some ghetto kid trying to scam drugs, Pemberton said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Something in Chin's expression was making his stomach drop. That's Dr. Catherine Williams' daughter, Chin said quietly, deliberately. The new chief of surgery. The one who started today. The one who now oversees this entire department and has the authority to fire attending physicians without board approval during her probationary period. The blood drained from Pemberton's face so quickly, he actually swayed in his chair. That's not possible, he whispered. The Williams kid said her mother was a surgeon, but I thought she was lying. I thought she was black, and I just assumed. You assumed a black teenager must be lying about her mother being a surgeon, Chin finished for him. You assumed she was a drug addict. You assumed she was ghetto trash. Your words, Richard, all captured on video. You assumed that someone who looked like her couldn't possibly belong here or have connections to power. Pemberton stood up abruptly, his legs unsteady. I need to explain. I need to apologize. I need to talk to Dr. Williams and make her understand it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Chin stared at him incredulously. You called her daughter ghetto trash. You accused a child with a visible fracture of being a drug addict. You refused to treat her broken arm. And you did it all because she's black. What part of that is a misunderstanding? I didn't know she was the chief's daughter. And if she wasn't? Chun interrupted. If she was just some black kid from the inner city with no powerful mother to defend her, would that make what you did acceptable? That's the problem, Richard. You think you only did something wrong because you attacked someone with connections. You don't even see that you did something wrong by attacking a hurt child in the first place. Pemberton's hands were shaking now as the full magnitude of his catastrophic mistake began to dawn on him. I need to fix this. Where is Dr. Williams now? She's in examination room 7, Chin said coldly. Personally treating her daughter's broken arm. The broken arm you said didn't exist. The broken arm you documented as minimal swelling and minor bruising. The broken arm that's now at risk of permanent damage because you delayed care for over 2 hours. When Pemberton opened the door to the staff lounge, ready to rush to room 7 and attempt damage control, he found his path blocked by 2 hospital security guards and a woman he didn't recognize, a tall, elegant black woman in a pristine white coat with the title Chief of Surgery embroidered in navy blue above her name. Dr. Catherine Williams, MD, FACS. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a malignant tumor that needs to be excised completely, with clean margins, to prevent it from spreading and killing the patient. Behind her, the hallway had filled with staff members, nurses who'd tried to report his behavior for months, residents who'd witnessed his discriminatory treatment patterns, attendings who'd looked the other way too many times. They were all watching now, watching the reckoning unfold. Dr. Pemberton, Catherine said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 20 years earning respect in a system designed to dismiss her. I'm Dr. Catherine Williams. I believe you've met my daughter. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the usual ambient noise of the emergency department, the beeping monitors, the overhead pages, the rolling gurneys, seemed to stop, as if the entire hospital was holding its breath to witness this moment of accountability. Pemberton's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Dr. Williams, I can explain. This was all a terrible misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Catherine's words cut like a scalpel through flesh. Let me tell you what I understand, Dr. Pemberton. I understand that you looked at my 17-year-old daughter, a child with an obvious fracture, in severe pain, begging for help, and you saw a drug addict. I understand that you called her ghetto trash. I understand that you accused her of malingering. And I understand that you documented in her medical record that there were no objective findings, which is falsification of medical records. She stepped closer, and Pemberton instinctively backed up against the doorframe. But what you need to understand is this. I've spent the last 2 hours reviewing every case you've handled in the past 6 months. I've pulled patient satisfaction scores, complaint logs, and outcome data. And do you know what I found? Catherine pulled out her tablet and turned it to face Pemberton, showing a data visualization that made several nurses gasp. Black patients treated by you waited an average of 47 minutes longer than white patients with identical chief complaints and triage levels. Black patients were 68% less likely to receive adequate pain medication compared to white patients with similar injuries. Black patients were 3 times more likely to be documented as drug-seeking, non-compliant, or hostile in their medical records. She swiped to the next slide, showing a timeline of complaints. In the past 18 months, you've had 12 formal complaints filed against you by black patients or their families. 12 documented instances of discriminatory treatment. Every single one was reviewed by the previous chief of surgery, Dr. Westbrook, and every single one was dismissed as a personality conflict or difference in medical opinion. Dr. Harold Westbrook, who'd been summoned from his office and now stood at the edge of the crowd, visibly paled. Catherine continued, her voice rising with controlled fury. A 63-year-old black woman with chest pain was told she was probably just having anxiety and sent home. She had a massive heart attack 6 hours later. Your note said she didn't present as a typical cardiac patient, which apparently means she didn't look white enough to have heart disease. A 14-year-old black boy with abdominal pain was accused of faking to get out of school. His appendix ruptured that night, and he nearly died from sepsis. Your documentation said he was malingering for secondary gain. A 29-year-old black woman in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy came in with severe headaches and blurred vision. You sent her home with Tylenol. She had eclampsia. She had a stroke. Her baby died. Your note said she was exaggerating symptoms and seeking attention. The hallway was dead silent except for the sound of one nurse crying softly. That baby's death is on you, Dr. Pemberton. That woman's stroke is on you. Every black patient who suffered needlessly because of your prejudice, that's on you. And my daughter's pain, her terror, her humiliation, that's on you too. Pemberton tried to speak, his voice cracking. I never intended. I was just trying to be careful about the opioid epidemic. Don't you dare hide behind the opioid epidemic. Catherine's voice cut through his excuse like a blade. The opioid epidemic was started by pharmaceutical companies and doctors who overprescribed to white patients. But somehow, the solution has become denying pain medication to black patients who actually need it. Somehow, concern about addiction has become permission to let black people suffer. She held up her phone, showing the viral video that now had over 500,000 shares. This video has been viewed by millions of people in the past 3 hours. The Department of Health and Human Services has announced a federal civil rights investigation of this hospital. The state medical board has opened an emergency review of your license. CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, The New York Times, The Washington Post, they're all covering this story. You didn't just destroy your own career, Dr. Pemberton. You've created a PR catastrophe that threatens the reputation and funding of this entire institution. CEO James Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face red with stress and anger. Dr. Williams, I think we should discuss this privately. No. Catherine's word was final. We're doing this publicly because Dr. Pemberton's racism was public. Because my daughter's humiliation was public. Because every black patient he's harmed deserves to see accountability happen in real time, not behind closed doors where it can be minimized or covered up. She turned back to Pemberton. Your employment at Mercy General Hospital is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. You will surrender your ID badge, your access cards, and any hospital property. You will not have access to any patient records beyond what's required for the ongoing investigations. You will not contact any current employees to discuss this matter. You will be hearing from our legal department about the harm you caused my daughter and the massive liability you've created for this institution. Please, Pemberton's voice broke. I've worked here for 11 years. I have a mortgage, 2 kids in college, a family to support. I made a mistake, one mistake. Nurse Jessica Martinez stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. I reported you 3 times in 6 months. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of behavior that you've been getting away with for years. Other nurses began speaking up, emboldened by Jessica's courage. He called my patient, a black grandmother with pneumonia, a frequent flyer, and delayed her antibiotics for 4 hours. He told me to stop coddling black patients who complained about pain. He said in a staff meeting that we needed to be more careful about which patients we admitted because certain populations were more likely to leave bills unpaid. He made me switch patient assignments because he said he didn't have the energy to deal with that demographic today. The testimonies kept coming, painting a picture of systematic racism that had been enabled and ignored for years. Catherine let each person speak, documenting everything, building an irrefutable case. When the testimonies finally ended, she turned to Dr. Westbrook. Dr. Westbrook, you reviewed complaints about Dr. Pemberton's behavior and dismissed every single one. You created a culture where nurses were afraid to report discrimination because they knew nothing would be done. You prioritized protecting a racist doctor over protecting vulnerable patients. Westbrook tried to defend himself. Catherine, you have to understand, these situations are complex. I couldn't just fire someone based on complaints that might have been misunderstandings. They weren't misunderstandings. They were patterns. You chose not to see them because investigating racism is uncomfortable, because holding white doctors accountable for harming black patients requires admitting that racism exists in medicine. It was easier for you to dismiss nurses' concerns than to confront a doctor who looked like you and came from the same background as you. She held up a folder thick with documentation. I've spent the last 2 hours building a case that any first-year law student could prosecute successfully. Dr. Westbrook, you're relieved of your advisory position effective immediately. You will not be involved in any patient care, administrative decisions, or institutional matters going forward. The board will decide whether to pursue further action against you. But as far as I'm concerned, your career at Mercy General ended the moment you dismissed the first complaint about Dr. Pemberton. The crowd shifted, some people shocked, others clearly satisfied to see accountability reaching the highest levels. Catherine's phone buzzed, a text from the orthopedic surgeon. Naomi's in surgery now. Needed immediate open reduction and internal fixation. Possible nerve damage won't be clear for several weeks. If this had gone another hour, might have lost function permanently. Catherine closed her eyes briefly, gathering herself, then opened them with renewed determination. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed everyone in the hallway, the doctors, nurses, techs, administrators who'd gathered to witness the confrontation. What happened to my daughter today represents a complete failure of our values, our training, and our commitment to equitable healthcare. But this ends now. She pulled up a presentation on her tablet that she'd apparently been preparing during those 2 hours of investigation. Effective immediately, we're implementing the following changes across all departments of Mercy General Hospital. First, zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Any employee found to have engaged in discriminatory treatment of patients based on race, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status will be immediately terminated. No warnings. No second chances. If you can't treat all patients with equal dignity and competence, you don't belong in healthcare. Second, independent complaint review board. Every complaint of discriminatory treatment will be investigated by an independent panel that includes community representatives, patient advocates, and medical ethicists, not just hospital staff who have institutional incentives to protect doctors. Findings will be made public quarterly. Third, mandatory anti-racism training. Every physician, nurse, technician, and staff member will complete comprehensive anti-racism and implicit bias training. Not the 2-hour online module we currently require, but intensive, in-person education about the history and current reality of racism in healthcare. This will be ongoing, annual training, not a one-time checkbox exercise. Anyone who refuses or fails this training will be terminated. Fourth, data transparency. We will track and publicly report patient outcomes disaggregated by race, including wait times, pain medication administration, diagnostic testing ordered, admission rates, and patient satisfaction scores. Every department will be required to review this data quarterly and explain any significant disparities. If your department shows racial disparities in care, you will be required to implement corrective action plans with measurable goals. Fifth, patient advocacy office. We're creating a patient advocacy office staffed with community members who can intervene in real time when patients feel they're being discriminated against. These advocates will have direct access to me and to department chiefs. They will have the authority to escalate concerns immediately, not through bureaucratic channels that delay accountability. Sixth, hiring and promotion equity. We will conduct a comprehensive audit of our hiring, promotion, and termination practices to identify racial disparities. Any manager found to have discriminatory patterns in their personnel decisions will be removed from leadership positions. We will also implement aggressive recruitment of Black physicians, nurses, and staff to better reflect the communities we serve. She looked around the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I know some of you are thinking this is an overreaction, that I'm being too harsh because this happened to my daughter. But let me be clear, if this hadn't happened to my daughter, it would have happened to someone else's daughter. Someone without power, someone without a voice, someone whose pain would have been ignored without consequences. My daughter will recover. Her arm will heal. But how many other children have been harmed by Dr. Pemberton's racism? How many patients suffered needlessly because the system protected him? How many people died because doctors didn't believe their symptoms were real? This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. This is about making sure that the color of your skin doesn't determine whether you receive competent medical care. The crowd was silent, absorbing the magnitude of what Catherine was proposing. Some faces showed resistance, the old guard who saw these changes as attacks on physician autonomy. But many more showed support, even relief. Finally, CEO Morrison spoke up. Dr. Williams, these changes will be expensive. The training alone could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The legal review, the community advocacy office. Do you know what's more expensive? Catherine interrupted. The federal lawsuit my family could file against this hospital. The Department of Health and Human Services investigation that could result in us losing Medicare and Medicaid funding, which accounts for 62% of our revenue. The loss of our trauma center designation if the American College of Surgeons decides our institution has systemic quality of care problems. The mass exodus of talented healthcare workers who don't want to be complicit in racist systems. She pulled up another slide showing financial projections. I had our finance department run the numbers during my investigation. The cost of implementing these reforms? Approximately $2.3 million in the first year, $800,000 annually thereafter. The cost of defending against the lawsuits we're about to face from every patient Dr. Pemberton harmed? Conservatively, $15 to $20 million. The cost of losing federal funding if HHS finds systematic civil rights violations? $340 million annually. The cost to our reputation and community trust? Incalculable. Morrison's face went pale as the numbers sank in. The financial cost of doing nothing dwarfs the cost of doing the right thing, Catherine continued. But more importantly, we have a moral obligation. We're a hospital. Our mission is to heal, to help, to provide care to everyone who walks through our doors. If we can't do that equitably, we don't deserve to exist. She turned back to Pemberton, whose security was preparing to escort out. Dr. Pemberton, I want you to understand something before you leave. You didn't just hurt my daughter today. You revealed a rot at the heart of American healthcare. The assumption that Black pain doesn't matter, that Black patients are lying, that Black bodies are somehow less deserving of care and compassion than white bodies. That assumption kills thousands of Black people every year. It's why Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. It's why Black patients are systematically undertreated for pain. It's why black communities don't trust hospitals or doctors. Her voice softened slightly, but the steel remained. You had the power to help a scared child, and you chose to humiliate her instead. You had the knowledge to heal, and you chose to harm. You took an oath to do no harm, and you broke that oath in the most fundamental way possible. I hope you spend the rest of your life thinking about that. I hope every time you see a black person in pain, you remember my daughter's face. Security escorted Pemberton away, and as he disappeared down the hallway, Catherine turned to face the assembled staff one final time. I want everyone here to understand something. Change is hard. Confronting our own biases is uncomfortable. Admitting that we've been complicit in a racist system requires humility that many of us don't want to show. But discomfort is not an excuse for inaction. She paused, her voice strengthening. My daughter is in surgery right now because a doctor's racism delayed her care. But she's also in surgery at a hospital that's about to become a national model for healthcare equity. Her pain is going to purchase something valuable. A system that protects the next black child who walks through those doors in need of help. Nurse Jessica stepped forward. Dr. Williams, the nursing staff wants you to know, we're with you. We're ready to do this work. Thank you for finally listening to us. Other voices joined in, expressing support, asking questions about implementation, volunteering to serve on committees. The energy in the hallway shifted from shock to determination. Catherine's phone rang, the hospital's head of public relations. Dr. Williams, we have over 40 media requests for interviews. CNN wants you live in an hour. What should I tell them? Tell them I'll hold a press conference tomorrow at noon in the main lobby, Catherine said. And make sure they know that Naomi wants to speak too, if she's feeling up to it after surgery. This is her story to tell as much as it is mine. The press conference the next day was standing room only. The main lobby of Mercy General Hospital had been transformed into a media circus. 23 news cameras, over 60 journalists, and a crowd of several hundred community members who'd gathered to witness this moment of accountability. Catherine stood at the podium, Naomi seated beside her in a wheelchair, her right arm in a cast from hand to elbow, her face still showing the emotional toll of the previous day's trauma, but her eyes clear and determined. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Catherine Williams, Chief of Surgery at Mercy General Hospital. This is my daughter, Naomi Williams. 24 hours ago, Naomi came to our emergency department with a serious injury and was denied care because of the color of her skin. The cameras clicked and flashed as Catherine recounted the events, her voice steady but filled with controlled emotion. I've spent my entire career fighting against racism in medicine. I've published papers about implicit bias in pain management. I've given lectures about health disparities. I've served on committees dedicated to increasing diversity in surgical specialties. And yet, despite all of that work, despite my position of power and authority, my own daughter was called ghetto trash and denied treatment for a broken arm. She paused, letting that reality sink in. If this can happen to my daughter, the chief of surgery's daughter, imagine what happens to children whose mothers aren't doctors, whose families don't have power or resources or connections, whose suffering happens in silence because no one with authority is there to witness it. Naomi leaned forward to her own microphone, and the room went completely silent. My name is Naomi Williams. I'm 17 years old. I'm a track athlete with a 4.2 GPA. I'm vice president of my student council. I volunteer at my church every Sunday. I've never been in trouble. I've never used drugs. I've never even had a detention. Her voice was strong despite the obvious emotion behind her words. But none of that mattered to Dr. Pemberton. When he looked at me, he didn't see an athlete or a student or a person. He saw a stereotype. He saw ghetto trash. And because of that, I sat in an examination room for over 2 hours with 2 broken bones, begging for help, being treated like a criminal instead of a patient. She held up her casted arm. This will heal in 8 to 12 weeks. But the lesson I learned yesterday, that lesson is going to stay with me forever. I learned that no matter how hard I work, no matter what I achieve, there will always be people who see my skin color before they see my humanity. I learned that racism in healthcare isn't just about statistics and studies. It's about real people suffering in real time. And I learned that if this happened to me, with all my privileges and advantages, then it's happening to countless other kids who don't have anyone fighting for them. A reporter from CNN raised her hand. Naomi, what would you say to other young black people who are now afraid to go to the hospital? Naomi thought for a moment before answering. I'd say your fear is valid. It's based on real experiences that you and your families have had. But I'd also say that we're going to change this system. My mom and I, We're not going to let what happened to me happen to other kids. We're going to make hospitals safe for everyone." Another reporter called out, "Dr. Williams, what consequences is Dr. Pemberton facing?" "Dr. Pemberton's employment has been terminated," Catherine said firmly. "The Georgia Medical Board has opened an investigation into his license. The Department of Health and Human Services is conducting a federal civil rights review, and we are cooperating fully with law enforcement regarding possible criminal charges for falsification of medical records and medical malpractice." "What about Dr. Westbrook, who dismissed multiple complaints about Dr. Pemberton?" "Dr. Westbrook has been removed from all positions at this hospital," Catherine said. "His conduct represents a failure of leadership that enabled Dr. Pemberton's racism to continue unchecked. We're also reviewing the cases of any other administrators or supervisors who ignored complaints about discriminatory treatment." A reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution asked, "What changes are you implementing to prevent this from happening again?" Catherine spent the next 10 minutes outlining the comprehensive reform package she'd announced the previous day: the zero-tolerance discrimination policy, the independent review board, the mandatory training, the data transparency, the patient advocacy office, and the hiring equity initiatives. "But beyond policy changes," Catherine added, "we're creating something else, something I'm calling the Naomi Williams Healthcare Equity Initiative." She gestured to her daughter, who smiled despite the pain medication making her drowsy. "This initiative will include an endowed fund for healthcare equity research, scholarships for Black and minority medical students, a fellowship program to increase diversity in surgical specialties, and a community clinic providing free care to underserved populations. I'm personally donating $2 million to establish this initiative, and I'm challenging this hospital's board, our medical staff, and this community to match that contribution." The room erupted with questions, but Catherine raised her hand for silence. "I know some people will say I'm overreacting, that I'm being too harsh, that I'm playing the race card or pushing a political agenda. But let me be clear about something. Healthcare equity isn't political. Human dignity isn't political. The right to receive competent medical care regardless of the color of your skin, that's not a liberal or conservative issue. That's a basic human rights issue." She looked directly into the cameras. "To every Black family watching this, I see you. I hear you. I believe you when you say doctors don't take your pain seriously. I believe you when you say you've been treated differently because of your race. Your experiences are valid, and we're going to address them systematically. To every healthcare worker who's witnessed discrimination and felt powerless to stop it, I'm giving you power. Report it. Document it. Use the new systems we're creating. You will be protected, not punished, for speaking up. And to every patient who comes through our doors, you deserve dignity. You deserve competent care. You deserve to be believed when you say you're in pain. We're going to make sure you get all of those things, regardless of your race, your background, or your circumstances." As the press conference ended, Naomi reached over with her good hand and squeezed her mother's fingers. "We did good, Mom," she whispered. "We're just getting started, baby," Catherine replied. Outside, the protesters who'd gathered the previous day had returned, but now they weren't protesting. They were celebrating, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Dr. Williams, justice for Naomi." And this is what change looks like. Over the next weeks and months, the transformation of Mercy General Hospital became a case study in institutional change. The video of Dr. Pemberton's racist treatment had been viewed over 15 million times. The story had been covered by every major news outlet in America. And most importantly, it had sparked a national conversation about racism in healthcare that was long overdue. The Healthcare Equity Initiative raised $12.7 million in its first 6 months, far exceeding the initial goal. 37 other hospitals across the country reached out to Catherine asking for guidance on implementing similar reforms. Medical schools began incorporating the Naomi Williams case into their ethics curricula. Dr. Pemberton's medical license was permanently revoked after the medical board investigation revealed a 15-year pattern of discriminatory care across 3 different hospitals where he'd worked. 7 other physicians at Mercy General were disciplined or terminated after the independent review revealed similar patterns of bias. But the real victory wasn't in punishing bad doctors. It was in changing the system that had protected them. Within 6 months of the reforms being implemented, racial disparities in pain medication administration decreased by 73%. Wait times for Black patients decreased by 41 minutes on average. Patient satisfaction scores among Black patients increased by 45%. The number of discrimination complaints actually increased because patients finally believed someone would listen, but resolution of those complaints happened faster and more effectively. Mercy General successfully recruited 12 new black physicians and 37 black nurses, beginning to address the diversity gap in staffing. The hospital's community clinic provided free care to over 2,000 underserved patients in its first 6 months. But perhaps most importantly, Naomi Williams returned to the track. 8 months after the incident, Naomi stood at the starting line of the Georgia State Championship 400-meter relay, her right arm fully healed, her body coiled with the same explosive power that had made her a state champion contender before her injury. Catherine watched from the stands, her heart in her throat, remembering the last time she'd watched her daughter run. The phone call from Coach Anderson, the rush to the hospital, the nightmare that had followed. But today was different. Today was about reclamation. The starting gun fired, and Naomi exploded off the blocks. Her form was perfect, head down, arms pumping, legs driving with mechanical precision. She rounded the first turn in second place, then the back stretch with the grace and power that had caught the attention of Olympic scouts. As she entered the final turn, Naomi shifted into another gear, that extra reserve that separates good athletes from great ones. She pulled even with the leader, then ahead, her face set with fierce determination. She crossed the finish line first, her time a personal record, 51.8 seconds. The crowd erupted. Her teammates mobbed her. Coach Anderson was crying openly. And in the stands, Catherine was on her feet, tears streaming down her face, watching her daughter reclaim not just her athletic dreams, but her sense of safety in her own body. After the medal ceremony, gold hanging around her neck, Georgia State champion in the 400 meters, Naomi found her mother in the crowd. "We did it, Mom," she said, still breathing hard from the race. "You did it, baby. All you." "No," Naomi said firmly. "We did it together. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You changed the system so other kids won't have to go through what I went through. That's just as important as this medal." Later that evening, at a celebration dinner, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message that made her smile. It was from a young black girl named Destiny Johnson, the 10-year-old who'd approached her after one of the healthcare equity presentations. "Ms. Naomi, I fell off my bike today and broke my wrist. I went to Mercy General, and they were so nice. The doctor believed me right away and gave me medicine for the pain, and everybody treated me like I mattered. I wanted to say thank you because I know it's because of you that they're being nice now. You're my hero." Naomi showed the message to her mother, who read it with tears in her eyes. "That's what it's all about," Catherine said softly. "One little girl who didn't have to be afraid. One child who got the care she needed without being traumatized. If we hadn't gone through what we went through, Destiny might have had your experience with Dr. Pemberton instead of good care." 3 weeks later, Naomi stood at another podium, this time at Stanford University, where she'd accepted a full athletic scholarship and declared her intention to major in pre-med with a focus on healthcare equity. "I used to think I wanted to be a doctor just to help people," Naomi told the assembled students, faculty, and reporters at her introduction press conference. "But now I know I want to be a doctor to change the system. I want to be the kind of physician who sees patients as human beings first, who believes their pain, who treats everyone with dignity regardless of their race or background." She looked at her mother, standing off to the side, beaming with pride. "My mom has spent 25 years fighting racism in medicine. She's published papers, given speeches, implemented policies. And it still took her daughter being harmed for real change to happen. That tells me we need more than policies. We need a fundamental shift in how doctors are trained, how they think about race and pain, how they interact with patients who don't look like them." A student in the audience raised her hand. "Naomi, do you ever regret that the video went viral? That your trauma became so public?" Naomi thought for a moment before answering. "Sometimes I wish it hadn't happened at all, that Dr. Pemberton had just treated my broken arm like it was a broken arm. But since it did happen, I'm glad people saw it. I'm glad millions of people witnessed what racism in healthcare actually looks like. Because for every person who commented this never happens or she's exaggerating, there were 100 black people saying this happened to me too, or this happened to my grandmother, or this is why my cousin died." She held up her formerly broken arm, now fully healed. "This arm is stronger than it was before it broke. The bones healed denser, more resilient. That's what trauma can do if you don't let it destroy you. It can make you stronger. Not because trauma is good, but because survival is powerful." As the press conference ended and Naomi walked across the Stanford campus toward her new life, Catherine stayed behind, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride, relief, and determination. The work wasn't finished. Racism in healthcare didn't end because one doctor got fired or one hospital implemented reforms. But change had to start somewhere. It had to start with someone willing to speak up, to demand better, to refuse to accept that suffering was inevitable. It started with a 17-year-old girl who turned her trauma into transformation. It started with a mother who refused to let her daughter's pain be meaningless. It started with a video that went viral and forced millions of people to confront an uncomfortable truth, that the color of your skin still determines the quality of care you receive in America. But it didn't end there, because Naomi Williams was just getting started. Have you or someone you love experienced discrimination in healthcare? Medical racism isn't just about individual prejudice. It's a systemic problem embedded in how doctors are trained, how pain is assessed, and how patients are valued. Black patients wait longer for care, receive less pain medication, and are more likely to have their symptoms dismissed as exaggeration or drug-seeking behavior. These disparities lead to higher mortality rates, worse health outcomes, and generational trauma within Black communities. Share your story in the comments below. If you believe healthcare is a human right that should be extended equally regardless of race, like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice, accountability, and transformation. Together, we can build a medical system that sees every patient's humanity, believes every patient's pain, and treats every person with the dignity they deserve.